You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Dr. Tahira Reid Smith, a distinguished engineer, inventor, and educator whose work spans multiple disciplines and has made significant contributions to the field of human-centered design and engineering. Tahira is the Arthur L. Glenn Professor of Engineering Education and a Professor of Mechanical Engineering and Engineering Design at Pennsylvania State University. She's also the founder and president of Jump Dreams, Inc. and the director of the Research in Engineering and Interdisciplinary Design Laboratory. Her innovative approach to engineering and design has garnered attention from numerous media outlets and has inspired countless young minds in STEM fields. Welcome, Tahira. Really excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And we have a lot to talk about. And I thought the best place to start the podcast today was to go back in time a little bit and talk about maybe some of your early career and inspiration. And I want to really start with how you came to invent a double Dutch jump rope device and how this ultimately led you to become a renowned engineer and the educator you are today. And I did some research, and I think this might have originated way back in maybe third grade with a poster contest that you won.
Yes, it goes way back to third grade. And it's interesting because when I was a college student, sophomore studying mechanical engineering at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, I was taking a class called Introduction to Engineering Design. And the theme was challenging the limits in sports and recreational activities. And I started out thinking about all the obvious sports, basketball, football. And I was just like, what are some of the limitations in those sports? And then I still remember when I had that major aha, like, oh my gosh, that idea I had when I was in third grade. And I just remember getting super inspired to just really start sketching out ideas. I remember having a 2-page morphological analysis done. It was just like flow hit me in that moment. And yeah, it was all the way in third grade. In PS 97, there was a poster contest asking us to draw a picture of something we wish we could have. And I remember the time frame because the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster had happened. And so a lot of the kids were drawing pictures of astronaut suits and things that was related to space. But I was just like, I wish I had a machine that could turn ropes for me because I love double Dutch so much. And I was an only child at the time growing up in the 80s in New York. I couldn't always go down the street to play because I had to be within eye view of your parents, right? Of your family, really. And it was only at school that I got to play. And so it just was like, man, if I had a machine that could just do this for me. Because, honestly, that whole idea of attaching the ropes to the gate, come on, folks. We know that you need 3 people. When you tie the ropes to the gate, you lose a lot of torque on that side. And then you have to do all this extra compensation and you never get a really good jump experience. So, yeah, it was like, I need a machine.
So then you won this poster contest in third grade. And then how did you end up in mechanical engineering?
So it's interesting. I've always enjoyed math and science. Middle school is when I really, it's like when that really got unlocked for me. I had really good teachers. I had, I still remember my math teachers. I still remember my science teachers. And we had to do science fair contests. So that foundation of math and science started in middle school. And then I went to high school and just continued to excel in those subjects. And then when it was time to start thinking of college, funny enough, I had this really simplified logic. I was like, if you like science, you should do something in medicine. And if you like math, you should do something in engineering. don't ask me where that came from. And so I said, well, I'm going to be a biomedical engineer. That is what I initially thought I would study. And this is before Google. I remember going to the library and getting a book out off the shelf to read about what do biomedical, like there was, I can't remember which library. I know it was in that school. It must have been the public library. And I remember reading about biomedical engineers, and they make artificial heart valves and different things like that. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And so that was my initial start. So when I went to RPI, this is before first year experience. Like when you went in, your major was declared, but you were taking a lot of the same classes as everyone else. And the first career fair that happened on campus, I had on my resume biomedical engineering major, looking for internships. And one of the recruiters said, "Well, you're too specialized. Like we don't really have positions," or something like that. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay. And I don't remember how this conversation came to be, but there was a senior undergrad student. She was one of the other few Black female engineers at RPI at the time, and she was studying mechanical engineering. She was like, Tahira, why don't you just switch to mechanical engineering? It's much broader, and you could always do biomedical things with that. And that's how I switched to mechanical engineering. Those were the factors that led to me switching majors.
That's really interesting. And then you've mentioned RPI a couple of times. Tell us a little bit about how your experience there shaped your approach to engineering and innovation.
Yeah, I would say I'm really grateful that I went to school there. I feel like broadly, the Northeast has like a spirit of innovation. A lot of the Northeast schools that is just really that energy. And I'm happy that I was at RPI. And I'm also glad that I had an instructor in particular, Bert Swersey, who was a serial entrepreneur who had multiple patents. He taught that sophomore design class that I took, and then some subsequent classes like Inventor Studio, and a variety of others. And so there was this culture of design and innovation that was there. You were encouraged to try to get a patent. You were encouraged to try to market your ideas. And my concentration at the time was manufacturing. And RPI has a really strong manufacturing undergraduate program. Like there was a 2-semester course you could take. I can't remember the name of it, but it involved designing a product and designing the process for making that product. And then the second semester would be sort of implementation. And I mean, you were on a team of like 10 students, and oftentimes you were creating some type of an artifact for, say, maybe a sponsor that they could give out at career fairs at their table. And so that culture of like making, like before that whole maker culture, before that became a name, that was common and normalized at RPI. That was the environment. And it really gave me a great foundation and a love for design. That's actually the classes I excelled in the most. And so it kind of like boosted my confidence and my sense of identity in that space. And but yeah, it really started there.
Sounds like it was an incredible experience. And speaking of design, your research focuses on integrating human-centered considerations in the design process. Tell us, how do you define human-centered design, and why is it crucial in today's technological landscape?
So human-centered design is really what it says. It's like keeping the human at the center of the process, at the center of the decisions. It's sort of a way to try to sort of locate designers, engineers in their journeys towards products and solutions, to not forget about the human. And there's also strategies and methods outside of engineering disciplines that are often used that can help inform how you might integrate these human considerations. And, like the D School, they have their methods. There's all these other, this is a deeply studied. There's so many publications and so much work that has been done on all varieties of human-centered design. And so when I say human-centered considerations, that sort of broadens it to think about, to sort of, how do we capture all things human, right? It may not be the formal sets of processes that you might hear with, with IDEO or Apple and some of these, but it's like, how do we capture some aspects of the human? So for example, some of the projects that I've done with cyber physical human systems or with human machine interaction kinds of spaces, we are capturing data, like maybe it's psychophysiological data, which could be heart rate or skin conductance or other kinds of information from the person, the human, that is informative to a model that's being created, or it's informative to an algorithm being developed. And that's sort of what we mean, right? Like what I mean, like human-centered considerations, not limited to design, because some of the things that I'm doing, they're not literally design, but it might be more systems, to creating systems, or helping create algorithms and such.
So, Tahira, can you share an example of how your human-centered approach has led to a significant innovation or improvement in a product or service?
Sure. So, broadly, there's a lot of work that we do in our research labs, and significant can mean the number of citations that you get, and you publish papers and some of that. But probably the closest example I could think of is a collaboration I did with Amy Martinet when I was at Purdue, where we looked at the thermal properties of curly hair, and we worked together to sort of characterize all that needs to be understood about these thermal properties of hair and a variety of hair types. And at the time, this project was funded by Procter and Gamble, and it was the first time their biochemists, to my knowledge, had worked with mechanical engineers. And at the end of the project, one of the deliverables that we were able to give them was a graphical user interface that helped to run simulations. So they do a lot of bench chemistry, bench experiments, and then there was some things that they could do using simulation to answer some questions that they may have had, and perhaps they could see how that would give insights to experiments, or how did it corroborate. So I would say, and the inspiration, the human-centered inspiration for this project came from understanding the problem that largely women of color, Black women with curly hair types, are experiencing as it relates to heat damage, and the hundreds of thousands of YouTube videos that existed where women were seeking or explaining their citizen scientific ways of coming up with solutions. And with mechanical engineers having a background in heat transfer and having to learn that, it just sort of inspired a bigger project. And that's how, Amy Martinet and I got together. She specializes in heat transfer at the nanoscale, and hair is at the micro scale. And so that was the inspiration that led to a number of interesting publications, awesome simulation that we were able to do to simulate sort of how temperature changes as a flat iron passes over multiple strands of hair, single strands of hair, and things of that kind.
What a really fascinating and insightful project. It sounds like that must have been a really fun one to work on.
It was fun.
And I want to ask you more about your work, because I know it bridges engineering with other disciplines like psychology. Can you talk about how this interdisciplinary approach enhances the innovation process?
Absolutely. So, a lot of things are interdisciplinary now, and it's recognized as valuable and important to innovation. I find that having some understanding of psychological methods or social scientific methods, that started with my PhD, which was in design science. And I was advised by a mechanical engineering professor and a professor from psychology and statistics and marketing. And that intersection sort of gave me the confidence to then step forward when I started my lab to bring in these methods, these strategies. And it's common in my field. There's a broader research community in design theory and methodology where this is normalized, that you bring in the social scientific methods into what you're doing as an engineer. It really enhances what you're doing, because a lot of times you could just write a survey. And I always say garbage in equals garbage out, but understanding, having foundation in how to better design surveys or interviews or to do an ethnography, like there's a method to the madness. And a lot of times what you find is people, maybe engineers or others will just say, hey, I'm going to do this survey, and the questions are biased. And so then you're using answers that are based on biased questions. So how is it really giving you quality information? But if you structure things correctly, and not everything is about a survey, some of it is observation, some of it is interviews. How do you make sense of what you were able to obtain from the human, and how is that informative to what you're doing as an engineer? Without it, without just being a truly traditionally trained engineer, you almost have to function with blinders on, because you're mostly trained to focus on the quantitative, functional aspects of things, the quantitative, functional, and objective aspects. Yet there are some subjective elements that are important, and that can make or break what you design or create. And we need to be able to get at that. So yes, psychology, the social sciences, awesome discipline to have some insights on. Can't call myself a psychologist, but definitely respect the methods, and I'm familiar with some of the methods.
So Tahira, that leads me to ask you, most of our listeners are tech transfer professionals. How do you think they can better facilitate collaborations across different academic departments to foster more holistic innovations?
It's interesting because Penn State has the Learning Factory, and there are sponsors from all backgrounds, from your traditional industry sponsors to individuals who may just need a design team to help them create a proof of concept. And with the audience being tech transfer professionals, there are IP agreements that can be signed between the students, the Learning Factory, and the individual and with NDAs and all of that, where you can work with an interdisciplinary team that can help you answer questions that you might have that might be difficult to answer on your own. That's one way to do it. And I'm sure there's other sort of resources for that's available through universities. They have to check locally and see what university is local to them, and how might they be able to engage. Another thing that's in this area is called Launchbox, which is open to entrepreneurs in this region to get all kinds of assistance. And so if there's a need for, say, getting some expertise in human-centered consideration, you might be able to find it at a place like a Launchbox.
Absolutely. Well, I want to turn now and ask you about your time at NASA, because you were a visiting scholar there from 2020 to 2021, and that must have been really just an amazing experience. Tell us how your time there influenced your research or maybe your perspective on technology development.
Sure. So my time at NASA was, I was a teleworker because this was during the pandemic, and everyone, COVID, we were in the throes of COVID. And so I worked remotely, and I worked with the Convergent Aeronautics Solutions Group. And the overall objective of my time there was to work with traditionally trained engineers and see how we might bring design research methods or design approaches to enhance or support what they were doing. And the beauty of the CAS group is the short name for it, was that it's a subset of people at NASA. It's not all of NASA, so that, they could carry on doing what they, been called to do. But this small group was sort of an exploratory group to see how might we use these methods to better inform our design processes. And so that was in the fall. In the spring, what I was able to do, what it did was inform a graduate level course that I taught, which had to deal with using design sprints to help sort of explore complex engineering problems and socio-technical systems. And it really involved using quantitative methods for getting at the people side. So the team or the students were grad students, and they were working on projects individually. And there was a process that was mapped out for them to follow that really involved, I'm trying to think of my three categories. I always have to pull up the course, but it was sort of like knowledge gathering. It was about problem framing. It involved a lot of front end work before they dove into their technical work. And so so my time at NASA certainly inspired that.
And I want to turn back now to some of your industry collaborations. You mentioned Procter and Gamble as one example, but I know your research program has received funding from various industry sources. Tell us a little bit about how you approach building and maintaining these industry partnerships.
Yes. So I'll tell you, all of them have such a different story. Like General Motors was through a connection. Procter and Gamble was the most interesting one. So Procter and Gamble took 3 years of persistent email.
Wow, you were persistent. Yes.
It took 3 years. I remember, so when I was at Purdue, there was an office that would help faculty meet industry reps when they came. And there was a time that Procter and Gamble was there, and some of the folks there knew I had interest in them. And although what they were presenting and what they were talking about didn't quite align with because I'd been thinking about this sort of thermal property for hair thing for a while. I want to say it started in 2012. I think it was about that time. And I met an individual, so I had a contact. And this contact, I would just email them almost like once, hey, I have this idea. Is there someone there that'd be interested? Silence, right? And then a year later, hey, just checking in, and blah, 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 blah. Silence. And then that third year, I think this was 2015. At this point, I had a master's student that had gathered preliminary data on these ideas, and we wrote a conference paper, a 2015 conference paper going to IDTC. This time when I wrote them and I had a paragraph of the abstract, then the person said, hey, by the way, I am retiring, but I'm going to introduce you to these individuals. And then those individuals invited me to come and do a seminar and consult with them for about 8 hours, and it led to a 2-year grant. And so that was the most fun one because it was it required persistence. The other ones were through connections, like maybe faculty connections that said, hey, I have this connection through an introduction. It wasn't all cold calling for, say, like General Motors and Ford, but P&G was a cold emailing process that led to that. As far as maintenance, now that's something I could work on, because a lot of times when the project ends, it's not always easy to get continued funding from the same source. It definitely requires continued outreach and being very intentional with networking.
Now, I've heard you refer to yourself as you engineer persistence, and I think that's a great example with P&G. So in terms of advice for tech transfer professionals who may be looking to strengthen university-industry collaborations, it sounds like persistence is definitely one of them.
Yeah, persistence. The thing with persistence is if you have a vision, if you can see the light if you can see the end, and you're like, man, if I could just, I know that this can work. I know this makes sense. Then it sort of is the fuel to just keep you at it, keep trying. So definitely persistence. Another is just really believing in your idea, because if you believe in what it is that you're doing or selling, then, I feel like that will come through. That will shine through when you interact with individuals. And it's just a matter of just keep knocking those doors until you find that right one to open. Absolutely. And don't give up if you fail.
Yes, that's definitely, you've got to pick yourself up and keep going. And in fact, the saying is very true about failing forward is sometimes a really good thing.
Yes.
So, Tahira, I wanted to ask you, you're a co-founder of Black in Engineering. Can you discuss the importance of diversity in engineering and innovation?
Absolutely. So, yes, I'm the co-founder of Black in Engineering. It was started in 2020, right around when there was just so much going on with the pandemic, George Floyd, and, there were things happening even at the Ivory Tower. And it was just a moment in time where Black engineers just needed a space to connect because a lot of us are one on campus or one in our department. And so it was a way to sort of corral Black engineering faculty around the nation to have a place to process just some of the things that had been going on at that time. And we're in our 5th year. And actually, there's a whole big theme, the year of the Black engineer, that we're focused on this year. And diversity is so important, especially in a time where right now it's being questioned. There's so many lessons learned. The lack of diversity has caused problems in the design of some early products. A classic one that a lot of people are aware of is when they designed sort of soap dispensers, and if you had brown skin, they wouldn't work. And why did it get deployed before that got discovered? Is because the design teams probably all had lighter skin. Oximeters, that was a big thing during the pandemic. Oximeters didn't work well on darker skin. There's even in medicine, there's like so much the need for understanding, to have cadavers and other
clinical trials and things too.
Clinical trials and things to help you understand, well, this is what brown skin looks like when it's bruised versus, white, lighter skin. Diversity is so critical to help reduce the instances of bias. It helps to reduce the instances of blind spots that can happen when you have homogeneous teams. It's important to have different voices at the table so that better decision making can happen. Better considerations of whatever products or systems you're designing can happen. In fact, I remember in my PhD research, I had to collect data from people. It was just like more of a survey kind of a thing, a computer-based survey. And it's easy to use what's called a convenience sample. Let's just get students on campus. But I really wanted to have a wide spectrum. So I got permission from like a home, an assisted living home, and I spent some time there so I could make sure some older people were there. I spent time, I got permission at the public library and a more diverse community, a mom and pop coffee shop. I didn't do a Starbucks. I did this local mom and pop, and they gave me permission because I just wanted representation in my data. And so this topic of diversity is so important. And it's not just diversity for the sake of it, it's diversity and excellence, which are not mutually, people are thinking it's one or the other. They come together. Diversity and excellence can exist together.
So given that, Tahira, do you have any thoughts on how tech transfer offices can play a role in promoting diversity and inclusion in the commercialization of university research?
One of the things that they could do is be intentional with looking at the faculty, the people on campus, and just engaging with them. I know that some universities have people from a technology commercialization office that will come and meet with you and just ask you about your research and maybe urge you to think about, well, are there ways that you can commercialize this? And I think they can be intentional by looking at their database. Like, well, who are all the people that have already been coming? And is it representative of our community's demographics? Maybe there's a low number of underrepresented groups. And so maybe you go find the faculty on campus that are underrepresented and talk to them about their ideas. Because first of all, they're already there that means that if they are at the university, it means they are qualified, they're excellent, and they were hired because they were expected to excel. And so it could just be a matter of just engaging with them to help them get out of their scientific mind and think about commercialization. And so maybe just a nudge, a lunch, a coffee to help some individuals see the value in what they're doing and how they might commercialize it.
Tahira, I also wanted to ask you about some of your work on compassionate design, because that's gotten some attention recently. Tell us a little bit about what compassionate design is and its potential impact on technology development.
Sure. So compassionate design is a framework that was created to help engineers think about the dignity, the sense of security, and the sense of empowerment that users ought to feel when they are engaging with a product or system you created. So it's sort of a very niche area of human-centered design because it really focuses on those three things: dignity, empowerment, and a sense of security. And the inspiration for that came from a lot of medical contexts, like women getting mammograms and some of that sort of lack of dignity and some of the intimidation that a lot of women have experienced. Also, those getting therapy, radiation therapy, and some of the fear and anxiety around just even how they're positioned on the table. The way this can have value is in the future for innovation is if creators are being intentional. They design their product or system, and then in addition to evaluating, is it the right size? Is it the right color? Is sort of asking these empathic questions, these empathetic questions. Will someone be embarrassed using this? Will someone feel intimidated? How might this generate anxiety in a person? Is there a way I could design that out? And I think it's supposed to just probe individuals into thinking about this. And I did this work with Dr. Priya Seshadri, who's working in industry when she was a grad student. And so, yeah, there's still more to do with this project, and I hope to continue it. I had a master's student work on this from a defense company perspective and how this could be insightful there.
Very fascinating. Yeah, because there are a lot of medical tests. I'm thinking besides mammograms, the colonoscopy is another one that I think people, compassionate design, there's the prep and then, that whole procedure. So there's probably a lot of things that can benefit from compassionate design. You're very busy and have a lot of research going on, and you have over 60 published articles, and you're also experienced as an editor as well. Tell us how you view the role of academic publishing in driving innovation.
Sure. So academic publishing, the role it can have is to bring credibility to what you're doing. So particularly peer-reviewed articles. It's one thing to just sort of write something and upload it online and it's not peer-reviewed. It's another when you write up your ideas and there's experts in the field that will critique it, give feedback, and you go through that process and then it's published. It's something that's archived. It's something that can now it's now considered a part of the body of knowledge. And so others can cite that work. And so the value in scientific publications is for that credibility. It's what helps to sort of bring credence to what you're talking about. That's the value there. So if you happen to be working on something that has something worthy of publication, and when it's time to stand before investors, that could add value when you could just say, hey, these studies have been done. Here's some published work on this particular thing. I feel like that gives you an edge in that, particularly in that space. So when you're thinking about standing before, it helps to, especially if you're a co-author, it helps to show your expertise. Well, I published this work in this respected journal, and it supports the data for the creation of this product.
Well, in addition to everything else you have going on, you're also an entrepreneur, and you founded Jump Dreams, Inc. Tell us a little bit about it and your motivations for founding the company.
Yeah, Jump Dreams, Inc. is The motivation comes from back to this double Dutch jump rope invention. The thing that's interesting with this invention is that it would not leave me alone. Okay. I did this in undergrad. It got a lot of attention. And then I went on to study a master's degree, actually to want to learn more about electromechanical systems. It's a whole story of just moving on through life because I didn't always have the resources to pursue it, but people kept talking about this, writing about it. It was in Veronica Chambers' book. Then I was a professor. 2012, no one wanted to hear about my research for the TED Talk. They said, "Can you talk about the double Dutch machine?" Here I am, a professor. 2017, I'm on an exam. I'm on a statewide exam. How did I find out? My friend's daughter was a fourth grader in New York taking this statewide exam, came home telling her mom about this exam she took about, and it had a lady that invented a jump rope machine. And she was like, "What was the lady saying?" Because her mom and I went to school.
Oh, that's
and then
hilarious.
"Oh my gosh, that's how I find out," right? And so it just kept chasing me to the point where in 2023, I was like, you know what? I need to try to revisit this again because the lack of closure, there was so much media on something that did not physically exist yet. The idea of it, right? And so 2023, I was like, I have to try to find a product design firm. This will be my third attempt. I had two other attempts with companies that wanted house mortgage level amounts to work with them. Ridiculous. I mean, you could buy houses with the amounts that they wanted. And I found this great company in San Jose, Spec Design, that loved the story, loved the idea, and offered me an amazing discount to work with them. And that is sort of finally bringing home this idea, from proof of concept to something that's market ready. And so that's where Jump Dreams came from. And then Nova, and I mean, all of this was happening right around that time. And it just made sense. You know what? Let me go ahead and start a company with the idea to see this all the way through to the end.
And how is that working out? How is Jump Dreams doing?
It's coming along. I am gearing up to do some pitches. I have a pitch deck in progress that's being put together. And that's what I need to do next is fundraising. The prototype is working. There is a video of it working on YouTube just to kind of show it. I need to file some new patents. And so that's the next big thing because, the clock starts ticking once you go public with your idea because I posted it online. The clock is ticking. So that's the next thing I'm working on. And I'm meeting with a couple of companies right now to figure out which one I'd want to work with.
Now, you mentioned this little girl who was taking this test and, it kind of alluded to you in that test. So obviously your story has inspired many young people, particularly in underrepresented groups. What advice would you give to aspiring inventors and innovators in academia?
Sure. The advice is to don't just stay within the walls of your university. Go out, bring the kids, if you can, bring them to your labs, if you can, do outreach, help them to see what's possible because a lot of kids, they don't know what's possible. Help them to unlock what's inside of them. I'm hoping to create an Innovators Academy for young people. That's one of my other projects that I have in my mind to do, and just be open to giving back and helping the next generation to see what's possible.
Now, looking ahead a little bit, do you see any emerging trends or technologies that you think are going to significantly impact the field of engineering and design in the next few years?
Well, right now, what's the one that's impacting everyone is artificial intelligence and generative AI and just that whole world. I already see a lot of research being sort of focused, like a lot of people focused on research in that area. There's projects, that is the thing. That's what's really dominating right now. I'd have to think some more to think beyond, okay, well, after AI, what's next? I'm sure that there's going to be a lot, especially after I feel like new innovations and new innovative ways of thinking is going to emerge in the midst of the current administration that we're in. I feel like it's going to inspire new sets of innovations and inventions.
Now, Tahira, as the podcast comes to a close, I wanted to ask, what's next for you? Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're particularly excited about that maybe you can share with us?
Upcoming projects or initiatives. Well, I'm excited about a project that I'm working on with a couple of postdocs in my lab. It's designed for the elderly, and it's in collaboration with a faculty member at University of Maryland. I'm really excited to see that unfold. And also, there is a project that I have in the Learning Factory. There are 2 teams working on this idea. It's basically how to increase situational awareness situational awareness for police officers, firefighters, EMT when they have high risk, low time decision-making tasks. And I'm super excited about one team is working on it from the standpoint of firefighters, another one is working on it from the standpoint of police officers. And it's really exciting to see what they're coming up with.
That could be hugely impactful and just save lives and make, those are tremendously stressful jobs with, like you said, very short time windows to make decisions. So that could be really very, very helpful. So, well, we look forward to learning more about that when the time is right. And speaking of which, how can our listeners learn more about your work and stay updated on some of your future endeavors?
You can visit my personal websites, TahiraReidSmith.com or JumpDreamsInc.com, or you could visit my laboratory website at Penn State. I think it'll be something like sites.psu.edu/readlab, and you could learn more there.
Great. Thank you so much, Tahira, for being on the podcast today. It's been fascinating to learn about your journey and all that you have going on. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to have been a part of this.
Tahira, this has been such an insightful conversation. Your passion for human-centered design, interdisciplinary research, and fostering diversity in engineering is truly inspiring. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Autumn on the Air. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your network. Until next time, keep innovating.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.